Dear besties, today's story is about a 21-year-old woman named Annalise who walked into prison innocent and came out 6 months later. Different. Not broken. Not stronger. Something else entirely. The prison guard who changed everything never laid a hand on her. What he did was so twisted, so calculated, that when you hear it, you'll understand why some violations don't need violence. But Annalise found a weapon he never saw coming. Want to know what it was? Then stay till the end. And if this story grips you the way it gripped me, hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe because stories like Annalise's need to be heard. Let's begin. The smell hit her first. Not the bleach or the sweat everyone warns you about. It was the smell of defeat, thick and metallic, like blood that never quite washed away. Annalise Torres stood in the intake room of Greenfield Women's Correctional, hands cuffed, orange jumpsuit 2 sizes too big, watching a guard with dead eyes scan her paperwork. Torres, cell B17. Move. She was 21 years old. 3 weeks ago, she was planning her college graduation party. Now she was inmate 847,293, convicted of a crime that never happened. The setup was clean, almost perfect. Annalise worked part-time at a boutique law firm, filing documents, making coffee, staying invisible. When $50,000 disappeared from the firm's client trust account, the senior partner, Richard Calloway, had security footage edited, bank records falsified, and witness statements coached. Annalise's fingerprints were on the safe because she cleaned it every Friday. Her access card showed late-night entry because she'd been working overtime, unpaid, trying to prove herself worthy of a recommendation letter for law school. The jury took 4 hours. Her public defender spent 3 of those hours on his phone. 18 months. Minimum security, they said, like that made it mercy. Her mother collapsed in the courtroom. Her little brother, Miguel, just stared. He was 16, the reason Annalise worked 3 jobs, the reason she never gave up. Now she was giving him a different kind of lesson. The system doesn't care if you're innocent. It only cares if you're convenient. Greenfield wasn't the worst prison in the state, but it wasn't gentle either. The walls were gray. The women were grayer. Annalise learned fast. Keep your head down, your mouth shut, your eyes on nothing. She ate without tasting. She showered facing the wall. She wrote letters to Miguel every night, though she never sent them. What could she say? That his sister, who promised to get him out of their neighborhood, was now wearing the same color as everyone they tried to escape? Then came Officer Nathan Cross. He wasn't like the other guards. They were loud, bored, cruel in that casual way people get when they stop seeing humans. But Cross was different. Early 40s, silver creeping into his dark hair, wedding ring that caught the light when he did head count. He smiled too much, talked too soft, remembered names. Torres, he said one morning during breakfast duty. You're educated, right? I saw your file. She didn't answer. Answering meant engaging. Engaging meant trouble. My daughter's applying to colleges, he continued, falling into step beside her as she carried trays. Smart like you, wants to be a lawyer. Ironic, huh? She kept walking. I'm just saying you don't belong here. Anyone with eyes can see that. 3 days later, he brought her a book. To Kill a Mockingbird. Figured you might miss reading real literature, he said, sliding it through the bars after lights out. Don't tell anyone. I could get written up for favoritism. She didn't touch it for 2 days. When she finally did, there was a note inside the cover. Asterisk, you remind me of Scout. Curious, brave, wronged by the world. Stay strong. N asterisk. Annalise's cellmate, an older woman named Carmen who'd been inside for 6 years on drug charges, watched her read the note. Be careful with that one, Carmen said, braiding her gray-streaked hair. The nice ones are worse. He's just being kind. Kindness in here always costs something. You just don't know the price yet. But Cross kept being kind. He brought her extra commissary items, said other inmates sent them but forgot to write names. He let her use the library computer for an extra 15 minutes. He asked about Miguel, remembered his birthday, wondered if Annalise had been able to call him. "You're a good sister," Cross said one evening, leaning against her cell bars. "He's lucky to have you fighting for him." "I'm not fighting for anyone anymore," Annalise said, the first real sentence she'd spoken to him. "I'm just surviving." "That's where you're wrong." His voice dropped lower, intimate. "You're still fighting. I can see it. That fire inside? Some people are born with it. My daughter has it. My wife used to have it before." "Well," he trailed off, shook his head. "Sorry. You don't need my problems." But he kept sharing them. His marriage was failing. His daughter didn't respect him. The job was crushing his soul. He felt invisible, unappreciated, hollow. And somehow, Annalise was the only one who understood. She didn't ask to be his confessor, but night after night, he came to her cell, stood outside the bars, and unloaded. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" he asked one night, 3 months into her sentence. "Like you're watching yourself make decisions, and you're screaming inside, but your body just keeps moving?" Annalise knew that feeling. She'd felt it since the day the verdict came down. "I think about you," he said suddenly. "Too much, probably. You're different from them." He gestured vaguely at the other cells. "You're real." She should have reported him. But who would she report him to? The warden who signed off on solitary confinement for women who complained? The other guards who called inmates by their crimes instead of their names? In here, Cross was protection. In here, the devil you knew was better than the ones you didn't. Then came the night everything shifted. Cross arrived at her cell at 2 a.m., hours past his rounds. His eyes were red. His breath smelled like whiskey. "She left me," he said, gripping the bars. "My wife took my daughter, said I'm too distant, too cold. Do you know what that's like? Giving everything to everyone and getting nothing back." "You should go home," Annalise said carefully. "Sleep it off." "I can't go home. There is no home." He fumbled with his keys, and Annalise's blood turned to ice. "I need to talk to you. Really talk. Not through bars." "Officer Cross." "Nathan. Call me Nathan." He opened the cell door. Carmen, on the top bunk, didn't move, didn't breathe, playing dead the way prey does when predators circle. Cross sat on Annalise's bed, too close. His hand found hers. "You understand me," he whispered. "In here, in this horrible place, you're the only real thing I have." Annalise's heart was a drum. Her mouth was sand. She thought about screaming, but screaming meant solitary, meant retaliation, meant the other guards circling like sharks. "I'm not going to hurt you," Cross said, reading her face. "I would never. I just need." His hand moved to her face. "I just need someone to see me." Then the lights flipped on. All of them. Emergency lights. A voice over the intercom. "All officers to intake. Riot in C block. Code red." Cross stumbled up, reality crashing back. He looked at Annalise, at his open hand, at the door he'd unlocked. Horror flashed across his face, quick and bright, before the mask slid back on. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Then he ran. Carmen climbed down from the bunk. "We're telling someone. Tonight. No one will believe us. Then we make them believe." The next morning, Carmen introduced Annalise to someone she called the Collector. Her real name was Jade, a lifer who'd been at Greenfield for 12 years, convicted of killing her abusive husband. She was 50-something, with sharp eyes and a network that stretched into every corner of the prison. "Cross," Jade said when Annalise told the story, her voice flat. "Yeah, he's done this before. 3 women in the last 5 years. 1 got transferred. 1 got released. 1 killed herself 2 months after she left." Annalise felt sick. Why hasn't anyone? Because he's smart. He never forces, never threatens. just makes you feel special, makes you feel safe, then crosses lines so slowly you don't realize you're drowning until you can't breathe. By the time you scream, you're the crazy one, the liar, the inmate trying to get revenge on a good man. So what do we do? Jade smiled, and it wasn't kind. We do what women have always done when the system fails us. We make our own justice. The plan was elegant, terrifying but elegant. Cross's weakness wasn't violence or power. It was his need to be seen, to be understood. So they'd give him exactly what he wanted, and they'd make sure everyone else saw it too. Jade had connections. A guard named Officer Mills who owed her a favor from years back. A maintenance worker who could access the security system. A chaplain who believed in redemption but also in accountability. They were building a web and Cross was walking straight into it. Annalise's job was simple. Let him keep confessing. Let him keep crossing lines. But this time, everything would be documented, recorded, witnessed. The chaplain gave Annalise a tiny recording device, blessed it like a weapon. God sees everything, she said, but sometimes God needs help showing the courts. For 2 weeks, Annalise let Cross come to her cell. She let him talk about his failing marriage, his ungrateful daughter, his loneliness. She let him hold her hand through the bars. She let him call her special, different, real. And every word, every touch, every violation of the boundaries between guard and inmate was recorded. But Cross was escalating. He started showing up during the day, pulling Annalise from work duty for random searches that lasted too long, happened too privately. He started leaving notes in her laundry. He started talking about helping her appeal, getting her out early, staying in touch after. "When you're free," he said one afternoon, backing her into a corner of the empty library. "We could meet, somewhere no one knows us. Start over. Be who we really are." "I'm half your age," Annalise said, her voice shaking. "Age is just a number. Connection is rare." His hand was on the wall beside her head. "Don't you feel it? This thing between us?" The camera hidden in the library clock captured everything. His face, his words, his body language. But Annalise knew recordings weren't enough. They needed something undeniable, something that couldn't be explained away. Jade provided the final piece. "He has a storage locker," she said, "off Route 9, pays cash every month. My contact says there are boxes inside. Letters, photos, evidence from the others. How do we get to it? We don't. We make him bring it here." The trap was set during a therapy session. The prison had a new counselor, a woman named Dr. Park who'd been briefed on everything. She called Cross in, said she was doing a welfare check on staff, that she'd heard he was under stress. Cross, starving for understanding, spilled everything. His failing marriage, his connection with an inmate, his confusion about boundaries. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he insisted. "I'm just being human. Is that a crime?" Dr. Park listened, nodded, then said the magic words. "It sounds like you need closure. Do you have anything you've been holding on to? Letters, perhaps? Things that help you process these feelings." The next day, Cross brought a box to the prison. Inside were letters from 4 women, 3 former inmates, 1 current. All detailed the same pattern: the kindness, the confessions, the slow erosion of boundaries, the implied promises, the emotional manipulation that never quite crossed into something prosecutable, but always crossed into something wrong. When the state investigators arrived, Cross tried to run. They found him in the parking lot, sitting in his car, crying. The box was on the passenger seat. So was a letter he'd written to Annalise, unsent, describing feelings no guard should ever have for an inmate. The trial took 6 months. 3 women testified. The recordings were played in court. The letters were entered as evidence. Cross's defense was that he'd been lonely, that he'd made mistakes, that he'd never forced anything. The judge wasn't sympathetic. "You held a position of power over vulnerable women and exploited their circumstances for your emotional gratification. Whether or not you committed a physical assault is irrelevant. You committed a violation of trust, of ethics, of basic human decency. 5 years. Registered as a sex offender. Barred from ever working in corrections again. Annalise was released 2 months later, her conviction overturned when Richard Calloway's assistant came forward with evidence of the embezzlement scheme. The firm settled $4,200,000 to avoid publicity. Annalise's lawyer said it was a win. It didn't feel like one. Home was strange. Too bright. Too loud. Miguel had grown 3 inches, his voice deeper, his eyes harder. He looked at Annalise like she was glass. "Did they hurt you?" he asked the first night, sitting on her old bed in their mother's apartment. "Not the way you think." She couldn't sleep. Every sound was a guard's boots. Every shadow was Cross standing outside her door, smiling that soft smile, asking if she was okay. She'd wake up at 2 a.m., heart racing, expecting to find him sitting on her bed, saying he just wanted to talk. Therapy helped, but not enough. The therapist called it PTSD, said trauma didn't need violence to be valid. But Annalise struggled to explain it to people who hadn't lived it. How do you describe being violated without being touched? How do you explain that someone can take pieces of you without ever raising a hand? "He made me feel like I mattered," she told her therapist 6 months after release. "In that place where everyone treated me like a number, he made me feel human. And then he used that feeling to make me complicit in my own exploitation. He turned my humanity into a weapon against myself." The therapist nodded. "That's the insidious part. The violence that looks like kindness." Annalise started speaking at universities, at advocacy groups, at legal conferences. She told her story, not for sympathy, but for recognition. Because what happened to her had a name: coercive control. And it happened more than people wanted to admit. 1 year after her release, she got a letter. Prison postmark. She almost threw it away, but something made her open it. It was from a woman named Alicia, 23 years old, serving time at Greenfield. The letter was short. Asterisk, "There's a new guard here. Officer Dennis Webb. He's nice. Too nice. He asks about my family. Brings me extra books. Says I remind him of his niece. Feels wrong, but I don't know how to explain why. Then I heard your story. I know why now. Can you help?" Asterisk. Annalise sat with that letter for 3 days. She could ignore it. She'd done her part. She'd testified. She'd won. She didn't owe the system anything more. But she thought about Carmen, who'd risked everything to protect her. She thought about Jade, who'd built networks in the dark because the light refused to shine. She thought about the woman who'd killed herself, the one who'd suffered alone because no one believed her. Annalise made a call, then another, then 10 more. Within a month, there was an investigation at Greenfield. Within 2 months, Officer Webb was fired. Within 3 months, Annalise had founded an organization, Voices Behind Bars, dedicated to documenting abuse in prisons, supporting survivors, and changing policies around guard-inmate interactions. Miguel joined her when he turned 18. "Someone has to keep you out of trouble," he said, grinning that crooked smile she'd missed so much. On the 2-year anniversary of her release, Annalise stood outside Greenfield's gates with 30 other women, all survivors of abuse in custody. They held signs. They told stories. They made noise. A reporter asked Annalise if she'd ever forgive Nathan Cross. She thought about it, really thought. "Forgiveness isn't mine to give," she said finally. "That's between him and whatever conscience he has left. What I can give is this, my voice, my story, my refusal to let what happened to me stay buried. Because silence is what men like him count on. And I'm done being silent." The segment aired that night. It went viral by morning. Within a week, 15 more women had come forward with similar stories from different prisons across 3 states. Within a month, there were calls for federal oversight. Within a year, new legislation was proposed. Annalise's life wasn't easy. The nightmares still came. The hypervigilance still lingered. Some days she couldn't get out of bed, the weight of everything crushing her into the mattress. But she had Miguel. She had her mother. She had purpose. And she had something Nathan Cross never did: the truth. 3 years after her release, Annalise enrolled in law school. Night classes while running the organization during the day. It was brutal, exhausting, necessary, because the system that had failed her was failing countless others, and she was done asking permission to fix it. On her first day of classes, the professor asked everyone why they wanted to be lawyers. When it was Annalise's turn, she stood up. Because I was 21 years old when I learned that innocence doesn't matter if no one's listening. I was 21 when I learned that abuse doesn't need bruises to be real. I was 21 when I learned that the people meant to protect you can be the ones who hurt you most. And I was 22 when I learned that survival isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning. I want to be a lawyer because there are still people trapped in cells, being told by guards that they're special, that they're different, that no one will believe them if they speak up. And I want to be the voice that says, I believe you, I hear you, and I'm coming. The class was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then everyone. Annalise sat down, heart pounding, and thought about the girl she'd been 3 years ago, terrified and alone in that intake room. That girl couldn't have imagined this moment. But that girl had survived long enough to become this woman. And that woman, she was just getting started. If Annalise's story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that courage doesn't always roar, sometimes it's the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I'll try again tomorrow. Then hit that like button. Drop a comment below telling me what part of her journey hit you hardest. Subscribe because stories like this matter. And share this with someone who needs to hear it. Real strength isn't about fighting back with fists. Sometimes it's about refusing to disappear. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.